Southern Italy is a region that lives closer to the sea than to the land. Almost everything here is built around the coastline. The cities, the roads, the way people live. Some villages hang above the cliffs. Others are hidden between the mountains. And some still look untouched by the modern world. This is where the most chaotic, atmospheric, and contrasting side of Italy still survives. Ancient ruins, narrow stone streets, active volcanoes, and the sea, present in almost every single frame. Subscribe to the channel, because ahead is a journey through some of the most beautiful places in southern Italy. Southern Italy is a part of the country that has always lived a little differently. Life moves at a different pace here. The architecture feels different, and even the atmosphere feels completely unlike the north of Italy. For centuries, this region was shaped by the sea, and it was through the sea that different civilizations arrived here. Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Normans. Each one left behind cities, temples, fortresses, and part of its culture. That's why southern Italy feels so diverse. In one place, you can find an ancient theater. In another, a medieval village built on a cliff. And nearby, a volcano that is still active today. Here, nature constantly shapes the lives of the people. The mountains forced cities to be built high above the sea, and for centuries the coastline was the region's main source of trade, fishing, and connection to the rest of the world. That's why most of the region's most famous towns are located near the water. Southern Italy is also known for its contrasts. Luxury resorts stand next to tiny fishing villages. Popular tourist destinations exist alongside towns where almost nothing has changed for decades. But the most important thing here is the atmosphere. Southern Italy doesn't feel perfectly organized. It's loud, chaotic, sometimes too old, but that's exactly what makes it feel real. Another defining feature of southern Italy is its volcanoes. This is where you'll find Vesuvius, Etna, and Stromboli. Some of them are still active even today. For thousands of years, they shaped cities, landscapes, and people's lives. And in some regions, the volcanic terrain still defines the coastline and even the shape of entire towns. Matera. For a long time, this city was seen as a problem that needed to be hidden away. Today, it's presented as one of the most unique places in Italy. Matera is located in the region of Basilicata, surrounded by a dry, rocky landscape. The most famous part of the city is the ancient cave district known as the Sassi di Matera. The houses here don't just stand on the rock. Many of them were literally carved into it. People lived inside these caves for thousands of years, and some parts of the city date back to prehistoric times. But for decades, Matera was a symbol of extreme poverty. In the middle of the 20th century, it was called the Shame of Italy. Many families lived without proper water, electricity, or sewage systems. Later, people were relocated, and the old districts slowly began to recover. The caves were gradually transformed into hotels, restaurants, museums, and homes. Today, Matera looks like a giant stone labyrinth. Stairs, arches, narrow passageways, and houses that seem to grow directly out of the rock. At night, the city changes completely. When hundreds of lights appear across the hillsides, Matera starts to look like an ancient settlement from another era. That's why it's often used in historical films and biblical scenes. Taormina stands high above the sea, between the sky and the water, and you feel it from the very first steps. The town clings to the slope of Mount Toro, overlooking the Ionian Sea on one side and Mount Etna, one of Europe's most active volcanoes, on the other. This place mattered long before it became a resort destination. Back in the 4th century BC, the Greeks settled here, and they shaped the logic of the town itself. Height as protection, views as control, and architecture that followed the landscape instead of fighting it. The ancient theater is the heart of Taormina. Built by the Greeks, rebuilt by the Romans, and still in use today. Not as a ruin, but as a stage. Sitting here, you see 3 layers of time at once. The stones beneath your feet, the town around you, and the landscape that hasn't changed for thousands of years. Few places let history coexist with scenery so naturally. Taormina was never a large city. Its strength isn't in its size, but in its position. Narrow streets, arches, balconies, and the constant feeling that you're not walking on flat ground, but along the edge of something. The Middle Ages, Arab influence, the Normans. Every era left its layer here. And yet the town never feels overloaded. It feels composed, restrained, as if it already knows it has everything it needs. The light in Taormina is different. It slides across the stone, lingers in the shadows, and by evening makes the whole town feel almost weightless. That's why writers, painters, and travelers came here for generations, not for noise, but for distance. Taormina isn't about Sicily as a whole. It's about a single point where landscape, history, and perspective come together in one frame. And when you leave for the next place, It feels as if the town doesn't say goodbye. It simply remains where it has always been, above. By the way, if you're enjoying these videos, please leave a like. It really means a lot to me. In Monopoly, there are almost no straight streets. The city grew chaotically, house next to house, wall beside wall. And because of that, the old town feels like a real maze. It's easy to take a wrong turn here, to suddenly end up in a tiny courtyard, or walk straight out to the sea. Monopoly is located in the region of Puglia, on the Adriatic coast. Its historic center is filled with white stone houses, arches, old churches, and extremely narrow passageways. Some of these streets are hundreds of years old. The city started developing back in ancient times, and later became an important port in southern Italy. That's why fortifications, castles, and massive seawalls were built here. One of the best-known parts of Monopoly is the Old Harbor. Traditional blue fishing boats can still be seen there today, and they've become one of the city's symbols. Unlike many resort towns, Monopoly doesn't feel overly touristy. The old town is still part of everyday life. People sit in small squares, hang laundry between buildings, and walk along the sea every evening. Ravello doesn't sit by the sea. It hangs above it. Almost 350 meters above the Amalfi Coast, where the noise fades and the air feels lighter. You don't arrive here by accident. You climb to it. The town appeared in the early Middle Ages as a refuge for people escaping the coastal cities. Back then, elevation meant safety, and eventually, isolation. Ravello was never a port. It was a place of observation. People didn't leave for the sea from here. They looked at it from above. The main square is quiet, unhurried. Stone walls, cafes, the bell tower of the cathedral built in the 11th century. Everything feels scaled down, as if the town refuses to take up more space than necessary. But the real Ravello reveals itself in its gardens. Villa Cimbrone, Villa Ruffolo, terraces suspended above the coastline, columns, arches, and a horizon that seems endless. Standing here, height doesn't feel threatening. It feels like distance. A separation between you and the world below. That feeling is what drew artists here. Wagner, Virginia Woolf, painters, composers, writers. Ravello never inspired loudly. It simply gave people room to think. Even in the middle of the day, the light here feels soft. It doesn't hit the stone, it glides across it. The shadows are long, the movement is slow, and it feels as though time itself moves more gently here, out of respect. Ravello isn't a postcard version of Amalfi. It's a pause above it. A town that doesn't look up at the sea from below, but allows itself to look down at it instead. In Amalfi, the coastline didn't leave people many options. Either build upward, or don't build at all. That's why the city climbs the hillsides instead of spreading outward. The houses stand on top of each other. The streets turn into staircases, and the road above the sea looks like it was attached directly to the cliffs. Amalfi is located on the famous Amalfi Coast, in the region of Campania. Today, it's one of the most famous places in Italy. But centuries ago, Amalfi was one of the most powerful maritime republics in the Mediterranean. During the Middle Ages, the city controlled trade routes, built its own fleet, and competed with Venice and Genoa. Thanks to the sea, Amalfi became wealthy and influential. The old town remains extremely dense. There are narrow passageways, arches, small squares, and buildings packed tightly together. The most famous landmark is the Cathedral of St. Andrew. The cathedral stands right in the center of town, and long stone staircases lead directly to it. But the most impressive thing about Amalfi is the landscape itself. Roads run above steep cliffs, the rocks fall sharply into the sea, and the houses seem to grow straight out of the hillsides. Because of the terrain, there are almost no flat streets in Amalfi. Many routes through the city are staircases, walkways, and narrow passages between buildings. That's why exploring the old town on foot is much easier than by car. And that's exactly why the Amalfi Coast is considered one of the most spectacular coastlines in Europe. And Amalfi itself became its main symbol. Scilla dei Turchi is a place where the coastline looks as if the sea carved giant steps into the rock. Not sharp cliffs, not dark stones, but wide, white terraces descending directly into the water. Scilla dei Turchi is located in southern Sicily, near the town of Rialmonte. The cliffs are made of a soft rock called marl. Over thousands of years, wind and sea slowly shaped its surface. That's why the rock became smooth, wave-like, and similar to massive stone staircases. That's also where the name Scala dei Turchi, Stair of the Turks, comes from. According to local legends, pirates and raiders once landed here, and locals referred to them as Turks. Because of the bright white rock, the sea nearby looks even more vibrant. Especially on sunny days, when the water turns turquoise and the cliffs appear almost completely white. Unlike many beaches in Sicily, the main attraction here isn't the sand, but the landscape itself. At sunset, the cliffs change color and begin to glow with warm golden tones. That's why Scala dei Turchi is considered one of the most recognizable natural landmarks in Sicily. In Modica, even the rooftops seem layered on top of each other. Some houses sit lower, others stand directly above them. Because of that, the city feels less like it was built gradually and more like it was stacked together over centuries. The streets constantly change elevation. Staircases turn into passageways, and houses blend into the hillsides. Modica is located in southeastern Sicily. After a major earthquake at the end of the 17th century, the city was almost completely rebuilt. That's why today it's known for its Baroque architecture. There are churches everywhere, light-colored stone, balconies, and narrow streets filled with stairways. One of the city's most important landmarks is the Cathedral of San Giorgio. It stands high above the old districts, and long staircases leading up to it became one of Modica's most recognizable views. From there, you can clearly see how the city spreads across the hillsides, lower streets, upper neighborhoods, domes, rooftops, and stone facades layered over one another. And because of this structure, Modica feels like one of the most visually striking Baroque towns in Sicily. Scilla is more than just a town. It feels like the edge of something. Here, the land reaches so close to the water that the houses seem to grow straight out of the cliffs. You step out of a narrow street, and the sea is suddenly right there. No distance, no transition. Scilla stands above the Strait of Messina, the narrow stretch of water between mainland Italy and Sicily. The currents here are strong, and the sea is never completely calm. Even in ancient times, this place was considered dangerous. According to myth, this was the home of Scilla, the sea monster that, together with Charybdis, dragged ships to their destruction. The myth wasn't born from imagination alone, but from fear of water that behaved unpredictably. Above the town rises Ruffo Castle. It wasn't built for beauty, it was built for control. Over the sea, over movement, over the border itself. From here, you can see Sicily and the route ships followed for centuries. Below lies Chanalia, the old fisherman's quarter. Houses stand directly above the water. Boats are moored beneath the windows, and it feels as though the sea isn't outside the town, but inside it. Life in Scilla has always been tied to the water. Fishing, waiting, returning. People here don't look at the sea as scenery. They read it, through the waves, the wind, the light. Scilla is small. It doesn't try to impress, but it leaves behind the feeling of a place where myth and reality were never truly separated. In the heart of northern Italy, among mountains and mirror-like waters, there is another hidden place where time seems to slow down. This is Tramezzo, one of the most charming corners of Lake Como. Tramezzo is located on the western shore of Lake Como. From here, you can enjoy some of the best views of the water and the Alps, which seem to rise directly from the lake. The crystal clear water, green hills, and historic villas create the atmosphere of a true Italian fairy tale. It's a place that attracts those looking for a quieter, more sophisticated escape. Unlike the more touristy Bellagio or Varenna, Tramezzo has its own style and a more private atmosphere. Here, it's common to see luxury yachts and exclusive cars arriving, something you can notice simply by walking along the lakeside promenade. This is also where the legendary Grand Hotel Tramezzo is located. It is famous for its luxury service, panoramic views of the lake, and its unique pool that literally floats on the water. One of its main gems is Villa Carlotta, a historic villa with spectacular gardens. In spring, thousands of flowers bloom, especially the large pink rhododendron bushes that fill the entire place with color. The villa is set slightly higher up, which gives you an even better panoramic view of Lake Como. And although the entrance fee is around 17 euros, it is one of those places where every euro is truly worth it. Tramezzo is also known for its peaceful atmosphere and narrow streets, where it's easy to get lost among the historic architecture. Here, every corner looks like it belongs on a postcard. In spring, it is especially beautiful, with bougainvillea blooming everywhere and adding even more color to the place. The best time to visit is April and May, when these flowers are in full bloom and nature looks especially alive. And if you don't make it during those months, don't worry. The climate here is mild and pleasant for most of the year, making it a perfect destination from spring through autumn. It's hard to choose just one moment when this place is at its most beautiful. Both at sunrise and at sunset, Tramezzo has the same charm. And when you're here, you realize that you want to keep every moment forever. By the way, if you're enjoying these videos, please leave a like. It really means a lot to me. Cefalù is a town caught between two forces. On one side, the sea. On the other, the rock. La Rocca rises almost vertically above the town. It doesn't frame Cefalù, it towers over it. And from the very first glance, it's obvious. This settlement was built not for comfort, but for protection. People lived here as far back as ancient times. Phoenicians, Greeks, Romans, and later the Normans. Each left its own layer behind, but the rock always remained the main presence. It offered visibility, shelter, and control. The town stretches in a narrow strip between the foot of the cliff and the shoreline. The streets are short. The houses stand tightly packed together. Here, shadow arrives faster than light, and everything eventually leads to the cathedral. The Norman Cathedral of Cefalù is one of Sicily's most important 12th century buildings. Its facade is severe, almost fortress-like, minimal decoration, as if it too were part of the town's defenses. But Cefalù is not only stone and history. You step out of the narrow streets, and suddenly there's the beach. Sand, light, an open horizon. The town feels caught between the need to stay strong and the desire to live lightly. Climbing La Rocca reveals another perspective. From above, Cefalù looks small, almost fragile, and you begin to understand why people fought so hard to keep this place alive, balanced between rock and sea. Cefalù doesn't try to charm you. It simply stands there, the same way it has stood for centuries. It doesn't stand beside the water, and not above it either. It is carved directly into the cliffs over the Adriatic. The houses seem to grow out of the stone itself. Balconies hang over the edge of the cliffs, and the waves crash so close beneath you that it feels as though the sea is breathing under your feet. There was already a settlement here in ancient times. The Romans built the Via Traiana nearby, the road connecting southern Italy to the empire. And from that moment on, Polignano was always on the route, but never just a place to pass through. The historic center is small, narrow streets, white stone, arches that suddenly open onto empty space and the sea far below. There is a lot of light here, and almost no shade. The sun reflects off the cliffs, the facades, the water. Everything seems to amplify everything else. The most famous spot is Lama Monachile, a small cove squeezed between two cliffs. The beach is covered in pebbles. The water is deep and dark blue. From above, it looks like a stage set. From below, it feels like another world entirely. The town disappears, leaving only stone, echo, and the sound of the waves. Polignano has no grand squares, no monumental cathedrals. Its power lies in connection. Everything here is built not to shield people from nature, but to live beside it. Risky, beautiful, without a backup plan. And that's exactly why Polignano stays in your memory so clearly, not as a postcard, but as the feeling of standing at the edge and looking down. Tropea stands on a cliff that looks as though it was left there specifically for the town. High, pale, almost vertical. Below it, the Tyrrhenian Sea. Above it, dense streets, narrow alleys, and the constant feeling of height. The town existed here as far back as Roman times. But it took its true form during the Middle Ages, when the coast of Calabria was under constant attack. Back then, elevation meant survival. This coastline offers no natural protection. It's completely exposed. So Tropea grew upward instead of outward. From above, the town seems calm. Balconies, palm trees, shadows sliding across old facades. But the moment you walk to the edge, the land suddenly drops away. This is where Santa Maria dell'Isola stands, a small monastery perched on its own rocky outcrop, connected to the mainland by a narrow strip of land. Once, it was an island. Today, it's the symbol of the town. The place feels almost unreal, as if geography itself placed it there. Below, the sea is transparent and bright, with sudden shifts in depth. The beaches beneath the cliffs are narrow, but among the cleanest in the region. Tropea isn't a resort in the classic sense. It doesn't relax you. It holds you in place. You constantly feel the edge here, the boundary, between land and water, between stability and falling. And it's exactly this tension that makes the town so unforgettable. Tropea never speaks loudly. It simply stands there, high above, looking down. Positano has no real center, no single point where everything begins. It begins above and ends at the water. The houses here were never built according to a plan. They seem to have appeared one after another, adapting to the slope, the light, the shadows, and whatever had already been built below. The village grows downward, in terraces, in stairways, in turns that constantly reveal a new perspective. Positano was once a small fishing village, poor, isolated, cut off from the rest of the world by mountains and sea. People didn't simply drive here, they made their way here. And maybe that's exactly why the village preserved its scale for so long. There are no large squares here, no straight streets. Everything moves diagonally, even your gaze. The light in Positano behaves differently. In the morning, it comes from above. In the evening, from the sea. The facades constantly shift in color, from white to peach, from ochre to soft pink. The beach below is narrow, rocky, and always crowded, because Positano is not about space, it's about verticality. Here, you are always either climbing or descending, and that changes your sense of time. Your steps slow down, breathing becomes part of the rhythm. Alberobello looks as though it was built not by people, but by a rule. The moment you enter the town, you understand. Everything here is different. Dozens, hundreds of nearly identical houses. White walls, stone cone-shaped roofs. No cement, no decoration. Just stone placed on top of stone. These houses are called trulli, and they were born not from aesthetics, but from necessity. In the 16th and 17th centuries, local landowners forced peasants to build homes that could be dismantled quickly. No permanent foundations, no official status. A way to avoid taxes and control from the Kingdom of Naples. The stones were stacked dry, without mortar. And just as easily, they could be taken apart again. What began as a loophole eventually became a system, and over time, an entire town. The streets of Alberobello are narrow. The roofs sit low. The space feels intentionally compressed, as though people were meant to stay close to one another. Some rooftops carry symbols, crosses, protective signs, astrological markings. Here, the line between faith, superstition, and everyday life feels very thin. Inside the trulli, it's cool. The stone holds the temperature. Outside, heat. Inside, silence. Alberobello barely changed over the centuries because it never had a reason to. Its form simply worked. Today, it's a UNESCO World Heritage Site, but it doesn't feel like a monument. It feels like a settlement that never realized time had moved on. Alberobello doesn't impress through scale. It impresses through consistency, and through the feeling that its architecture grew not from ambition, but from survival. That's exactly why it feels so honest. Loco Rotondo is a village that neither climbs nor descends. It closes in on itself. Its name literally means round place, and that's not a metaphor. The historic center truly forms a circle, with streets revolving around the heart of the village instead of rushing outward. The settlement appeared during the Middle Ages, when safety meant compactness. People here didn't build to impress, they built inward. White houses stand tightly side by side. Balconies overflow with flowers. Geraniums hang so low it feels as though the streets pass through greenery. It's easy to get lost here, but difficult to hurry. Every turn redirects you slightly sideways instead of forward. This village doesn't present itself all at once. There's no single view that explains everything. You have to walk through it slowly, in circles. Loco Rotondo isn't a destination. It's a state of balance. A place where Italy, for a moment, stops being movement and becomes form. You see Ostuni long before you arrive. Before entering the town, it's already there in the distance. White, on a hill, like a mass of light rising out of stone. They call it La Città Bianca, the White City. And it's not an exaggeration. For centuries, the houses here were covered in white lime wash, for coolness, for hygiene, and as protection against disease. The white color wasn't a style choice, it was necessity. The town developed gradually. First, the Messapians, then the Romans, and later the medieval period, when hilltops once again became symbols of safety. The old town is a labyrinth. Stairs, arches, blank stone walls, unexpected balconies. It's easy to lose your sense of direction here, but that was always part of the design. For outsiders, confusion. For locals, protection. The Cathedral of Santa Maria Assunta rises above the town, blending Gothic, Renaissance, and Baroque architecture. And yet even it doesn't try to dominate the skyline. Nothing in Ostuni tries to shout for attention. Ostuni is a town that doesn't need decoration. Its purity isn't decorative, it's structural. And maybe that's exactly why it stays in people's memories so strongly. Like an image, like silence, like a white pause in the middle of Puglia. Gerace stands high above the land, not above the sea, above space itself. The village sits on a rocky plateau overlooking the valleys of Calabria for miles in every direction. This wasn't accidental. It was strategy. The name comes from the Greek word irax, hawk. And Gerace truly feels like a watchful bird, placed here to observe everything below. The settlement took shape during the early Middle Ages, when people fled the coastline to escape pirates and invasions. The mountains meant opportunity. Height meant time to react. The old town is built almost entirely from raw stone. Not plastered, not decorated, unpolished. No one tried to hide the material here. They accepted it. The streets are narrow and straight. Few curves, few accidents. This is a village designed for control, not for wandering. The symbol of Gerace is its cathedral, one of the largest Norman churches in southern Italy. Massive, restrained, built as though it were an extension of the rock itself. Gerace is one of those places where history isn't romanticized. You feel it physically, in the uneven stone streets, in the worn steps, in the cold walls, even during summer. It's easy to imagine life here reduced to essentials. Nothing unnecessary, nothing extra. Gerace doesn't attract accidental visitors. It takes effort to reach it, and maybe that's exactly why it has remained almost unchanged. This is a village where Calabria reveals its harsher side. Not dramatic, enduring. Bova is a village on a border, not only a geographical one, but a cultural one. It lies deep in the Aspromonte Mountains, far from the sea, on a slope facing the Ionian coast. From here, you can see vast distances, but getting here is not easy. And that is exactly why Bova survived. It is one of the centers of the so-called Greco-Calabrian culture. For centuries, the Greco language survived here, a descendant of ancient Greek dialects brought to southern Italy in antiquity and reinforced during the Byzantine era. Even today, some locals still know words, songs, and expressions that have nothing to do with Italian. Bova is not an Italian village in the usual sense. It feels like a separate cultural island hidden inside the country. The architecture is restrained. Stone houses, bare facades. Everything is shaped by the slope and the wind that constantly moves through the streets. The center is small, one square, a few stairways. A cathedral that doesn't dominate the village, but quietly closes the space around it. You can feel the isolation here, not as a problem, but as a condition for preservation. While the world below kept changing, Bova remained itself, without needing explanations, without trying to become something else. This village doesn't ask for attention. It exists for those willing to climb and listen. You see Pentadotolo before you even realize it's a village. Above the valley rises a massive rock formation shaped like a hand with 5 stone fingers. That's where the name comes from. Pentadotolo, 5 fingers. The village is pressed tightly against this cliff. Not beside it, beneath it. As if the rock itself is hanging over the settlement, refusing to let go. In ancient times, this was a Greek settlement. Later, Byzantine, and always remote. A place for people who trusted the landscape more than walls for protection. The narrow streets climb upward. Some houses are carved directly into the rock. And it feels as though the village is held together not by foundations, but by balance. In the 17th century, Pentadotolo became the site of a bloody family tragedy that turned the village into legend. After that, it slowly began to decline. People left. Homes were abandoned. Today, Pentadotolo is almost empty. Not a museum, not a reconstruction, more like a pause. Silence sounds different here. Wind moving through stone, echoes of footsteps, and the feeling that the landscape remembers more than people do. Pentadotolo is not about beauty, it's about tension, frozen in stone. Badolato stands on a hill facing the Ionian Sea, high above it, but gently. Unlike Gerace or Pentadotolo, this village doesn't overwhelm you with height. It reveals itself slowly, in layers. Badolato took shape during the Middle Ages, when the coast was dangerous and the hills were the only safe choice. People moved upward, but never lost their connection to the sea. The old town is compact. Winding streets, warm stone, facades lighter than those found deeper in Calabria. There are balconies everywhere here, and views outward. The village doesn't close itself off. It looks outward. In the second half of the 20th century, Badolato nearly emptied out. Young people left. The houses remained. But instead of complete decline, something else happened. People slowly started returning. Some came back from emigration. Others arrived from cities. The village gradually came back to life, not because of mass tourism, but because life slowly returned to it. Today, Badolato stands as an example of how a small settlement can survive not by resisting change, but by changing its pace. Badolato is Calabria without drama. Calm, sunny, and deeply human. Noto is a town that was born twice. After the devastating earthquake of 1693, the old city of Noto disappeared, and instead of rebuilding the ruins, the entire town was relocated, completely. That's how the Noto we see today came into existence, one of the purest examples of Sicilian Baroque architecture. Everything here was built according to a plan. Straight streets, clear geometry, facades made from golden limestone that changes color with the sun. Warm in the morning, almost white at midday, copper-toned by evening. The architecture of Noto is not about defense, and not about confinement. It's about display, about recovery, about saying, we survived catastrophe, and we are beginning again. The cathedral rises above the town like the final point of a composition. Not like a fortress, but like a stage. Noto does not hide itself. It is open, bright, almost theatrical. Southern Italy is difficult to reduce to a single image. It's not just cities, and not just the sea. It's cliffs, volcanoes, islands, old ports, cave districts, and roads hanging above the coastline. Every part of this region looks different. Campania, Puglia, Basilicata, Sicily. All of them are unique, but together, they create that unmistakable image of southern Italy. Chaotic, old, contrasting, and instantly recognizable. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos about some of the most fascinating places in the world.